All right, Nick Whale and John McKechnie here with you talking best bets for NFL Week 6. John, before we get into all of our favorite bets and some notes that we want to pass along to begin the show, I'm going to do it. I'm putting on the hat. You cannot convince me to take this thing off. I'm putting on a Jacksonville Jaguars hat. They've done it. They are no longer the lone winless team in the NFL.
Huge, absolutely huge. Texted you on Sunday during the game. Trevor Lawrence is dialed, and you know what? He was. I mean, we had some moments of uncertainty in there, but you know what? For whatever reason, the football gods decided that Indianapolis doesn't get out of Duval with a win ever. Mm-hmm. That has been the case since 2014, and it will be the case again all the way until next year at the very least. And I love to see it.
We love it. We love it. Jags, of course, now heading out to their home away from home in London, where they will play the Bears this week. They'll get the Patriots next week, trying to get this season back on the rails. John, really interesting board this week in Week 6. We have 10 road favorites as of recording here. We have some high totals. We saw a lot of scoring around the NFL in Week 5. We got some big spreads as well. Big spreads that we'll be approaching, though, with caution because the dogs continue to eat. NFL dogs of 5.5 or more, now 19-5-1 ATS on the season. Those teams are 13-12 straight up. We saw Arizona. We saw the Giants win as big underdogs. New Orleans didn't quite come through for us on Monday night, but still a 2-1 straight up week for the big dogs. And I know we're going to be talking about some of these big spread games later in the show.
No, exactly. I wondered how long that this trend could possibly hold, but we're into October and it still appears to be a pretty profitable way to look at the board. It's pretty remarkable. And I think that there are a couple of teams here that are ripe for the picking as far as big underdogs this week. But, a little teaser, a little preview. I think I am going to walk right into the fire with a couple of these big favorites as well, though. So, I mean, I'm kind of mixing and matching this week. And, I could see this leveling out. We've got 4 games where the spread is at 6 or more.
Yep.
Thinking we might get a little 2-2 action there.
All right. I like it. We'll get into each of the games that we are targeting momentarily. But John, we did have some big news on the quarterback front for several teams this week. Not 1, not 2, but 3 teams will be starting a new quarterback this week. 2 of those, Vegas and New England. We just have a straight up quarterback change. New England moving on to Drake May, finally. And Las Vegas turning things over to Aiden O'Connell. New Orleans, of course, will be without Derek Carr, not only this week, but it sounds like, this could be a multi-week injury, something that could plague him for a while. Not quite sure who we'll see yet for New Orleans. Could be Jake Haener, could be Spencer Rattler. We'll talk more about that game later on. But when it comes to New England specifically, John, this is the most exciting of the 3 because the Patriots themselves have been telling us since the preseason, yeah, Drake May, he's been better, but we're also terrified to put him out there because our offensive line is so bad. New England is home for the Houston Texans this week. Do you give a slight upgrade to New England just on the thought that, by default, Drake May has to inject some life into this passing game?
It does make them a little bit more dangerous. I think it gives the Patriots offense more juice going forward, but I do think that going up against the Texans right now out of the gate with that pass rush that Houston possesses, I think is a pretty dangerous spot to be throwing them out there. And, our colleague Mario Puig kind of had a good summation of this where it's kind of a half measure. And if you ever watch Breaking Bad, Mike famously said no half measures. And that's kind of what it feels like with what New England's doing, where, they make the kind of big political decision, right, to say we are not starting Drake May to start the year. Things go about as badly as most expected for New England through the first month of the season. Outside of that Bengals game, they've kind of more so looked like what most people expected. And that shouldn't really change your plan too much. If this was kind of the expectation, and now you're throwing Drake May out in a tough spot against a really, really good Houston team that's clicking. I feel like this is a bit of a misstep on Mayo's part, and therefore, I do continue to feel good about the Texans in the spot as one of the big favorites this week. I think this could be a bit of a rough debut, even if I am optimistic about May in the future.
Yeah, this game didn't make my list, and the number's just a little too high, sitting right at the key number of 7 across the board. Totals down at 38 at the DraftKings Sportsbook, a little bit higher, 38.5 at FanDuel. The absence of Nico Collins, I think it's going to be huge. I guess part of the reason you bring in Stephon Diggs is you can now feel better about surviving an absence like this. But, I mean, Nico Collins has been, bar none, the best receiver in the league so far, John. And the Texans, this is a very lucky 4-1 team. I think this team could easily be 3-2. They could easily be 2-3. You like to see the Pats on the schedule. You like to see a rookie quarterback, but I do wonder, like, if Houston had their choice, would you rather face Jacoby Brissett or would you rather face Drake May?
You probably would rather face Jacoby Brissett because it's the devil, right? I think that, over the course of Brissett's career and over the course of this season, you're just kind of keenly aware that this is a team that can't throw the ball, it can't take the deep drops or risk getting sacked as a result. And May, I think, is more mobile. I mean, he had some great rushing numbers during his time at North Carolina. Really athletic guy, brother of Luke May, if you remember him from his basketball UNC days, of course. So, this guy can move around and create and everything. So I think that element of volatility that could be added to the Patriots offense probably adds a little bit more, tension for this game plan when it comes to Houston's defense. But if they just throw the kitchen sink at him or anything even remotely like it, I think that, that this could be just a real welcome to the NFL moment for May.
All right, John, let's go rapid fire through the 6 games that we want to discuss. We'll each have 3 to bring to the table. Where are you going first?
Well, we're going to start with the Battle of the Beltway between the Baltimore Ravens and the Washington Commanders. The Commanders catching 6.5 points as underdogs in this spot. Washington kind of like the darlings of the NFL through the first month plus of the season. They've been a really fun story. I don't think anyone really expected things to be going quite as well as they have. And frankly, I think that they present the worst type of matchup for this Baltimore defense because Baltimore, they can stop the run as well as anybody. But, as we saw last week and as we've seen against the Cowboys and against the Raiders and, in key spots against the Chiefs, their secondary is in big trouble. Their secondary is very, very vulnerable. The safety play has been terrible. The Zach Orr experiment at defensive coordinator, they've had to kind of call in old pal Dean Pease to help as in an analyst role. Dean Pease used to be the defensive coordinator there in Charm City. So you're getting a Washington team that runs the ball well, but they're a pass first operation in my opinion, and they know that, and it's playing to their strengths essentially. You take away the run game for Washington, they're just going to pepper you through the air, and I think that spells trouble for Baltimore. I think big explosive plays could happen, and not for nothing, but Baltimore is big favorites at home over the last 3 years. Over the last 11 games, Baltimore is 3-8 against the spread when favored by 6.5 points or more at home. 3 outright losses in that span, including 2 of their last 3 in that particular setup against Indianapolis last year and against the Raiders earlier this year.
Yeah, interesting that this number is sitting as high as it is because Washington is basically at the top of the board in just about every offensive category, and Baltimore's number 2 in a lot of those categories. So I get that, but Ravens still getting a lot of respect. You do wonder if they don't win that game against Cincinnati, do we see a different number here? But I think the market is telling us that Washington still has to earn this reputation. 65% of the money, by the way, coming in on Washington to cover this number, which is an interesting reversal compared to last week when the Browns ended up being the public side. I think a lot of people saw that as maybe the big regression spot or perhaps the progression spot for Cleveland.
Right. And I was kind of among that. Like, we record earlier in the week, and by Saturday, I got some texts about, I'm locking in my picks for this week. I'm looking at 3.5 for Cleveland. I'm like, oh man, with that hook, I'm not sure about Washington in this. And it's just like, oh man, I hope they didn't take that advice and took the advice that I gave out on this actual pod where I was all over the Commanders.
For my first game, John, we are going across the pond. We're going to London, and we are going to take the Chicago Bears -1.5. They are a slight favorite in what is technically a home game for Chicago. Obviously, Jacksonville has the familiarity element here. A lot of players on this roster have been to London before. They did the 2-week stay last year. Favorites are 35-10-1 straight up in these NFL international games. They're 31-15 against the spread. We just saw Minnesota win and cover as a favorite last week against the Jets. Now, rookie quarterbacks are 0-5 straight up and against the spread in international games, which does scare me a little bit. But this is essentially a fade of the Jacksonville Jaguars defense, John. I think we saw some progress last week from the offense. I mean, Trevor Lawrence had quite literally the best and most efficient game of his career. 97% of the passes he threw were on target, which is just a ridiculous number. But this defense almost blew that game multiple times. I mean, Jacksonville had a 2-score lead with about 5 minutes left, and 2.5 minutes later, all of a sudden it was a tie game, and it came down to a field goal from Cam Little. Yeah, Caleb Williams has not been overly accurate so far this season, but I think he's gotten better and better with each passing week. I think he's coming off of his best game of the season by far last week against Carolina. And Caleb Williams leads the NFL in 20-plus yard pass attempts. He's been pretty inefficient on those, but I think those are the shots you want to keep taking on this Jacksonville defense, which is, one, just straight up not good, very poorly coached, and it's still missing Tyson Campbell. It's still missing its only good linebacker in Foye Oluokun. I think this is a pretty good spot for the Bears to keep that ground game going, to really, gouge Jacksonville through the air, and then ultimately, kind of stomp out this Jacksonville offense with what's still one of the best defenses in the NFL.
And in Williams's case, you go back to his college days, and what was one of the things that jumped out to you on tape is his deep ball. So I think that, there's that adjustment period coming in and playing against NFL caliber talent, but I think he absolutely has what it takes to start being much more of a threat on those deep passes. And when you're surrounded by the talent that he is, with getting DJ Moore on track last week in a pretty big way, you still got Roma Dunze. I think that some of those deep shots are going to start to land at a higher clip, and that does have to make you nervous if you're on Jacksonville.
All right, time for your second game, John. Where are you taking us?
Where are we going? We're going to the Mile High City. We're going. Denver has been a tricky team for me to get a hold on, but Denver is hosting the Chargers this week. The Chargers coming off the bye. The Chargers are slight favorites in this spot, 2.5-point favorites. I think public perception is very interesting when it comes to the Broncos, because they looked like probably the worst team in the league through the first couple of weeks, and then you reel off with the wins against the Bucs and the Jets, and then last week as well, and it's like, well, maybe there is something here, and I do believe that more than anything, this Denver defense is for real and is going to continue to be so. And I think that this is a Chargers offense that isn't overly explosive, so I definitely understand the appeal for Denver, and I feel like generally moving forward, I am going to like Denver as home underdogs, but I do like the Chargers coming off the bye here. They're going to be healthier. Remember how banged up they were going into that bye. So should be, kind of more closer to full strength. You got Harbaugh with a couple of weeks to prepare here. And again, key number being a big factor here with it just being 2.5. I think the Chargers can cover that and win this one by a field goal. But if you're not picking up what I'm putting down as far as this is concerned with the side, the total might interest you. It is the lowest of the week. That shouldn't surprise anybody, 35.5. But even still, John Ewing had this great stat earlier. Totals under 40 this season. The under is 8-4. And last year I took a little look at these two teams, and their matchups, 31 and 25 points combined in those two games. So that there's not going to be a lot of scoring in this one. I don't think it would have to honestly be through, fluky special teams or defensive touchdowns to push this one to threaten the over.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. And a lot of it does depend on the health for the Chargers. We haven't gotten firm updates yet on, Joey Bosa or either the tackles, Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater. But you have to think coming off of the bye and getting Derwin James back as well from his one-game suspension should be big. I'm all on fading Bo Nix. I know he's looked better these last couple of weeks, but I don't know what you can really take out of a game against the Las Vegas Raiders at this point. My second game, John, we were traveling down to Dallas, Texas, where the Detroit Lions, also coming off of a bye, are playing this week. I'm taking Detroit -3. I really like the Lions here. I know the defense looked a bit vulnerable in that Seattle game 2 weeks ago, but if this game does turn into a shootout, I trust Detroit more. I think they are the most well-balanced offense in the NFL. I think they have the best running back 1-2 in the NFL. And I still think there's some progression that can happen within this offense. We saw a lot of explosive plays from Jameson Williams over the first couple of games of the season. I think there's still more meat on the bone for him. They could get Sam Laporta more involved as well. Jared Goff 6-1 against the spread as a road favorite as a member of the Lions. He is 19-11-2 on extended rest throughout his career. He's covered 7 straight games on extended rest. And this is another game, John, that has a high total, complete opposite of what we're seeing in Chargers Broncos. Totals as high as 52.5 at some shops right now. I would lean under here. Lions games 11-5 to the under when the total is at least 50 in the Jared Goff era. We know the indoor-outdoor stats when it comes to Goff, 38-18 ATS indoors, either Detroit or on the road over the last 4 seasons. And, good job by Dallas to survive that Giants game. Good job by Dallas to convert that 4th down, win in Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh defense to me feels like there's been some slippage there. I still don't really know what you take away from a win over the Giants, but that Saints game and that Ravens game are still fresh in the mind. I think those are the two best teams that they faced this season, and they got boat raced in both of those. And I think, with all the injuries on the Dallas side, specifically on defense, they still don't have Brandon Cooks. On offense, they still can't really run the ball. I don't think they're going to be moving it on the ground against Detroit like they were against Pittsburgh. It's a lot to ask, I think, for this Dallas team to keep up.
Yeah, I think that the Dallas receivers are definitely going to have to come correct in this one, and on the other side, I think that Detroit, if you were to point to one sort of weakness, it probably is the secondary. We saw it get a little bit exposed against Seattle, but to your point, I think that there's just kind of no way that Denver or Dallas is going to be able to run the ball in this spot. The Lions have one of the best run defenses in the NFL. Goff, like you said, kind of unassailable numbers in dome settings. So this looks great for him. And then, yes, sportsbooks have gotten been very profitable in hanging these huge numbers in Detroit Lions games and then collecting their winnings off of those games, going under when everyone wants to see it, go in the 60s and 70s and what have you, but it just doesn't tend to be that way. So I like the under here, and I do like Detroit. So I'm in lockstep with you here.
Total aside, it's like this is one of those games where, contrary to last week, Dallas, it just felt like, all right, if they could score 23 points, they're going to win that game. Like, Dallas could score 30 in this game and still lose and not cover. It's like I think if this does turn into a shootout, if we get the implied total that we think it does, if this game is played in the mid 30s or one team is in the 40s, I think that team is going to be the Detroit Lions. And I think part of the reason that we saw that secondary struggle against Seattle is because Seattle was moving the ball so effectively on the ground. I mean, Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet were ripping off like 7 yards per carry. And maybe this is a decent spot to get Rico Dowdle going, but I still don't think there's that much ground game upside here for Dallas. So it's a little bit different when you don't have to worry about, that elite ground attack that Seattle was rolling out. All right, John, your third and final game. You foreshadowed this early on, walking into the fire with a big favorite.
We're doing it. And that big favorite resides in Philly. I like Philly -8.5 against Cleveland. I know that you're not a film buff, but there's a great film called Memento, where this guy cannot remember basically anything. So his body is covered in tattoos, and they are all clues to let him know, remind himself, who to trust, who not to trust. My Memento tattoo this year is basically, like Wednesday through Saturday, sometimes I can be a little like, oh, maybe this is the hold your nose Cleveland spot. The tattoo says, don't bet Cleveland. Don't do it. So understandably, the trends say that big favorites have struggled this year. That obviously is the case. But Philly coming off the bye, they get A.J. Brown hopefully coming back this week. I think that really adds some juice to this passing game. I know that Jalen Hurts hasn't been great as a big favorite. The Eagles have obviously been big favorites a lot during his tenure. He's just 3-7-1 against the spread of late when favored by 7 or more points, according to the Action Network. So, you can be concerned by that. You can be concerned by the big dogs eating, but my Memento tattoo says don't take the Browns. And I think that the Browns are fully on quit watch. I thought last week's performance was fully embarrassing by them against Washington. They just go up 95 and get embarrassed again here in this spot. I love the Eagles.
The Browns have, given us no reason to believe otherwise. I mean, their only win this year came against the Jags, which means absolutely nothing, unfortunately, for me. And this team has yet to score 20 points. I mean, they're a lock to just give you like 13 to 17 every single week. I don't think that gets it done against a Philly team that is coming in off the bye and will be significantly healthier, right? I mean, you're getting, in all likelihood, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Lane Johnson, all these guys back in the mix. And I think maybe we're a little bit down on Philly because of how they looked before the bye, but you take A.J. Brown away from any team, that's going to make a huge difference. And obviously losing Devontae Smith for that Bucs game was massive as well. So yeah, it's dicey, man. We've seen so many of these big dogs cover already this season, but I cannot get there with the Cleveland Browns. I don't know how anybody could have faith in this team right now. For my third and final game, John, we're going down to New Orleans. We're heading down to the French Quarter. We are taking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to win and cover this game, cover the 3.5. Simply put, it's a fade of the Saints quarterback situation. I think to me, this would have been essentially a toss-up game anyway, even if Derek Carr played. I don't think it would have been crazy to think that Tampa Bay could win by 3 to 7 points with Derek Carr. I know there is some perceived upside with Spencer Rattler. He was a big name like 7 years ago coming out of high school, bounced around a little bit at the college level. And it did feel like kind of at least earn back some of his reputation at South Carolina. But either way, whether it's Jake Haener, who we saw briefly at the end of the Chiefs game, or it's Spencer Rattler, it's a 5th or 6th round quarterback, making his first NFL start. And traditionally that does not go well, even at home. We also have a huge rest advantage here for Tampa Bay. They have kind of a weird week. They had to get out of town early because of Hurricane Milton. So they've been in New Orleans, essentially the entire week, but they played on Thursday in week 5. New Orleans, of course, played on the road in Kansas City on Monday night. So it's a home game for New Orleans, but there is still a pretty significant rest advantage for Tampa Bay.
Off the top of your head, do you know if there are betting odds for a Mike Evans, Marshawn Lattimore fight?
Dude, I wish. DraftKings, if anybody's watching this, please give us something. Like what would a Mike Evans injection be? Like plus 350?
I mean, that's free money at plus 350. I feel. I mean, it's those two, they love to tangle. What else can you say about it? But I think in New Orleans' case, it's going to be really interesting to see which quarterback they roll out, because I think if they start Haener, I think we see both quarterbacks. I don't think that Haener finishes this game. I really loved and appreciated the work that Jake Haener did on Saturdays during his time at Fresno State, but he is not an NFL quarterback by any stretch, no matter how many steroids he does. Whereas with Rattler, there's at least that element of surprise. There's the ability to threaten deep. The Rashid Shaheed role doesn't go away just because Spencer Rattler's in the game. Although on the flip side of that, it could be like Rattler throws 3 picks in the first half type of thing. So bear that in mind. And I think either way, whichever door you open, on the other side stands the Buccaneers covering.
All right. There we go. That's all I needed to hear. Let's talk some player props, John. I'll let you go first. We can kind of list off some of your favorite targets this far for week 6.
All right, so I'm going to run through a few of these. That they're mostly receiving yardage and anytime touchdown props. Going to that Washington-Baltimore game, I do like Terry McLaurin over 58.5. That's juiced a little bit, minus 125. If you can get it also at 60.5 for like minus 114, I believe, at FanDuel. So whichever flavor you prefer there, go for it. But either way, I like the over for Terry McLaurin. I like the under on Elijah Moore. It's sitting at 25.5 yards. I could see him just having like 1 catch for 11 yards on 3 targets, that type of thing. Just don't think that this Cleveland passing game is getting much going, especially not the tertiary options like one Elijah Moore. I do like the over of 51.5 yards for T. Higgins as well. I think that, as he continues to kind of build back up to 100%, I think that the big game is coming for him, especially against the Giants. And then a couple of touchdown scores. I like A.J. Brown to get back into the end zone in his first game back. Again, we'll have to follow the injury report, but feeling good there. And it's been a little bit since my pal Zay Flowers has visited the end zone. It's been since week 2 against the Raiders. High-scoring game in Baltimore on Sunday. I think that he chips in, his fair share here. So anytime touchdown for Zay Flowers, plus 125.
Okay, we love it. I'm going Najee Harris, anytime touchdown at plus 125. Najee Harris, of course, has not found the end zone so far this season, despite a heavy workload. I think he breaks through. I think the floodgates open this week going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. Another guy who's off to a slow start, Sam Laporta. We'll take an anytime touchdown for him at plus 145. Started to see a little bit more involvement for Laporta against Seattle in week 4. You have to think Detroit's going to make a point to get him more involved. Obviously, somebody who ate a ton in the red zone last season, and I think Detroit will spend plenty of time in the red zone against Dallas. Caleb Williams, over 235.5 passing yards. I think this is a game where he could go over 300 on this Jaguars secondary. It is quite literally the worst in the NFL. PFF agrees with that. A lot of the advanced numbers agree with that as well. So I think this is a bit of a low number for Caleb Williams. And, the Bears have been running the ball better these last couple of weeks, but Jacksonville is actually a pretty decent run defense. So I think this is a game that Chicago wins through the air. Travis Etienne under 48.5 rushing yards. Very difficult defense in Chicago. All of a sudden, Tank Bigsby feels like he's going to have more of a role. He outsnapped Travis Etienne last week, and really the big plays just have not been there for Etienne. So we like the under. Derrick Henry, this is just like an auto bet for me every week, John. Over 2.5 rushing yards. As fun as the Commanders are, this is still a very bad defense, and I think there is a chance that gets exposed this week. I don't think they're able to hold Derrick Henry down like Cincinnati did a week ago. And Henry still went over his yardage prop because of that long run in overtime. But I think we see a nice bounce back from him. Roma Dunze, 40 plus receiving yards at plus 105. Again, that one's tethered to Caleb Williams, bad secondary for Jacksonville. Bears have been using a lot more play action lately as well. Roma Dunze feasting in those scenarios. Jags defense struggles facing play action. We're going back to the well on Jaden Reed, over 23.5 longest reception. That one cashed in the first quarter last week against the Rams. We're actually getting a slightly lower number this week against Arizona, but I like that at plus 120. And then David Montgomery, over 57.5 rushing yards. Not going to keep piling on this Dallas team, but I think we see points on the Detroit side, and I think they're going to try to force the Cowboys to stop the run above all else. So I really like Montgomery this week. I think we're getting quite a fair number there. All right, John, it's that time. I need a parlay of the week, and I need a lock of the week from you.
All right, the parlay of the week. We like the under in the Chargers versus the Broncos. That's 35.5. They say low. We go lower. Like Washington, plus 6.5 against Baltimore. And I like the Eagles, minus 8.5 against the Browns. That'll get you around 6-1. If you're feeling extra froggy and you want to take the Commanders' money line, that gets you to around 11-1 because the Commanders' money line plus 240 right now.
Okay. All right. I'm feeling a little saucy. I don't mind that. John, I'm taking a big underdogs to cover parlay here. No straight up winners, just covering. So that will be Washington to cover 6.5. That'll be New England to cover 7. And that'll be Carolina to cover 6.5 against Atlanta. That gets you to plus 589 at the DraftKings Sportsbook. And my lock of the week, I feel like I can't talk about this game anymore. I'm taking the Detroit Lions minus 3.
Our cowboy hat wearing brethren are never going to listen to us again after this berating of the Cowboys.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see, man. I've been wrong in the last 2 Cowboys games. So I had them to cover. Thank you to Brandon Aubrey for ruining that one 2 weeks ago, and then had Pittsburgh at home, man. All we needed was that 4th down stop. So hopefully this is the week we can get right on that Dallas team. Again, you're taking Washington plus 6.5. I'm taking Detroit minus 3. That'll do it for the NFL Week 6 betting focused episode here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast.